everybody. My name is Alex, and I'll be your event host tonight. Thank you for coming out and supporting your locally owned bookstore. If you haven't yet purchased The End of Night by Paul, you're going to find it on the desk display up here. So please turn off all your cell phones, pagers, anything that will beep or buzz in the next 45 minutes. So as a native Minnesotan, Paul Bogard grew up watching the stars and moon from a lake in the northern part of the state. He has lived and taught in New Mexico, Nevada, Wisconsin, and North Carolina, is now an assistant professor of English at James Madison University in Harrisonburg, Virginia. The End of Night is his second book, preceded by Let There Be Night, an anthology on nighttime experience. So please help me welcome Paul Bogard.
Well, thank you very much. I don't know if this is on or not. What? There, maybe that's on. Well, anyway, I'll speak loud. Thanks for coming out. I know there's all sorts of different things to do, and coming to a reading is sometimes in the middle of the evening, so thank you for being here. What I want to do tonight is read a little bit from the book and show you a few images. This is a subject, as you might imagine, light pollution, that works well with images. So it'll be a way for me to talk about a lot of different things and give you a lot of information all at once. So, and then after the slides, I'll read a little bit more, and we'll have time for questions, and we'll go from there. So, I'll jump right into a reading from the toward the beginning of the book, where I go to upstate New York to meet with an astronomer there whose name is Bob Berman, a longtime astronomy writer, and he has as his special ability to write humorously about astronomy, which he says is a challenge. He said to me, what's so funny about Pluto, for example? What's, that kind of thing. But he had the most delight out of an article that he wrote called F in Science, which is an article where he gathered all the stupid questions that he'd been asked over the years and just had a lot of fun sharing those questions. His favorite was, if a solar eclipse is so dangerous, why are they having it? And I think my favorite of what he told me was, does Mars have a sun like our sun? So we've driven out he made a homemade observatory where he goes out to look at the stars, and he's taken me out there, upstate New York, to take a look at the moon tonight. Of course, the stupid questions column has a serious point to make, that most Americans don't know much about the night sky. I used to count myself among that number. I was always drawn to it, but I'd never known its names and numbers, its secret lives. In fact, here's what I did know. Planets don't twinkle, and therefore I could supposedly tell them from stars, and two prominent constellations, the Big Dipper, which actually is part of a constellation, and Orion. That's not bad, Berman tells me. The only thing most people know is the moon. That I know more than I used to has a lot to do with Bob Berman, and especially his book, Secrets of the Night Sky. Here's some of what I learned. One of the stars in Orion, Betelgeuse, is the largest single thing most of us will ever see. Sure, a galaxy is bigger, but a galaxy is a collection of stars rather than a single thing. And anyway, no galaxy is bright enough to shine through the light pollution that covers most of the developed world's skies. Betelgeuse, on the other hand, writes Berman, is brilliant enough to bulldoze its way through the milkiest urban conditions. Or how about this? Rigel, another brilliant star in Orion, shines with the same light as 58,000 suns. Rigel is farther away than the other stars making up the constellation, and as Berman explains, if Rigel were as close to us as the others, our nocturnal landscape would tingle with sharp alien Rigel shadows, and the night sky would always be as bright as when a full moon was out. The moon tonight, a waning gibbous a few days past full, is bright enough that our view at the observatory won't be as great as it otherwise might be. When during its 29-day cycle, the moon is big enough and therefore bright enough to wipe so many stars from view, most astronomers are not excited to see it. But Berman seems genuinely delighted to roll back the roof on his do-it-yourself observatory and say to me, "Here, take a look at this." I'm not prepared for what I see. The gray-white moon in a sea of black, its surface in crisp relief, brighter than ever before. I'm struck too by the scene's absolute silence. It's clear, yes, brilliantly so, but the moon seems cold, antiseptic, alone in the unfathomable expanse of space. I learned a lot about the moon from Berman's writing, like it's more brilliant when it's higher, when it's nearer, and winter when sunlight striking it is 7% stronger. And I appreciate this kind of information. But I think our relationship with the moon has more to it than simply astronomical facts. With my naked eye, on nights when the moon climbs slowly, sometimes so dusted with rust and rose, brown and gold tones that it nearly drips dirt colors and seems intimately braided with earth. It feels close, part of this world, a friend. But through the telescope, the moon seems, ironically, farther away. So we looked at the moon for a while, and then he wanted to show me Saturn. And Bob's a pretty big guy, and his telescope is a pretty big telescope. It's one of these big 6-foot-long telescopes. And I have this image of him walking over to it and embracing it like a dancer and kind of turning it like this over to Saturn. And he told me a really interesting thing, which is that he's shown Saturn to people more than 1,000 times, and he always gets one of two reactions. Either, "Oh my God," or "That's not real," which I think is really interesting. And he and I started to talk about why would you have that reaction of "that's not real"? He told me sometimes people think that he's somehow secretly put a slide of a photograph of Saturn in the telescope somehow, and that they're looking at a picture. And so we started to think about the value of seeing things for yourself with your own eyes. And I told him about this night in Morocco when I was 18. The most beautiful starry night I've ever seen was more than 20 years ago when I was backpacking through Europe as an 18-year-old high school graduate. I'd traveled south from Spain into Morocco, and from there to the south to the Atlas Mountains at the edge of the Sahara Desert, to a place where nomadic tribes come in to barter and trade, a place that when I look on a map, I can no longer find. One night in a youth hostel that was more like a stable, I woke and walked out into a snowstorm. But it wasn't the snow I was used to in Minnesota or anywhere else I'd been. Standing there bare chest to cool night, wearing flip-flops and shorts, I let a storm of stars swirl around me. I remember no light pollution. I remember no lights. But I remember the light around me, the sense of being lit by starlight, and that I could see the ground to which the stars seemed to be floating down. I saw the sky that night in 3 dimensions. The sky had depth, some stars seemingly close, some much farther away. The Milky Way so well defined, it had what astronomers called structure, that sense of its twisting depths. I remember stars from one horizon to the other, stars stranger in their numbers than the wooden cart full of severed goat heads I'd seen that morning, or the poverty of the rag-clad children that afternoon, making the night sky so plush it sometimes still seems like a dream. So much was right about that night. It was a time of my life when I was every day experiencing something new. I felt open to everything, as though I were made of clay and the world was imprinting on me its breathtaking beauty and terrible reality. Standing nearly naked under that Moroccan sky, skin against the air, the dark, the stars, the night pressed its impression, and my lifelong connection was sealed. I told Bob about this night in Morocco, and he said, he kind of leaned back and scratched his chin, and he said, a sad corollary to that is when my mother-in-law came to visit us from Miami, and she had only lived in New York City and Miami, and we heard the car park outside and the door shut and her walk toward the front door, and there was this pause before she knocked, and then the knock, and my wife went to open the door, and her mom said, Marcy, what are all those little white dots in the sky?